Hi everyone, I'm here to provide you with an environmental brief video about a really interesting study by Sotiridis al. that was published in 2018. Now typically in environmental exercise physiology research, we study if long-term exposure to an environmental stressor such as altitude leads to beneficial adaptations that help improve the stress response or exercise performance under that same environmental stressor. So again, like altitude. However, what we know less about is if adaptations to an environmental stressor such as altitude can cross over and alter performance in different environments such as the heat or the cold. In this study, they aimed to test the potential crossover effect of adaptations to altitude, which is also known as hypoxia or hypoxic stress, and to see if they can cross over to other environments such as sea level or performance in the heat. Now, chronic altitude exposure leads to beneficial adaptations that might help for performance in different environments. Some of these positive changes include changes to our cardiovascular system, such as an increase in our hemoglobin mass or concentration, which helps O2 carrying capacity and oxygen transport throughout the body. Additionally, there's an increase in bicarbonate, which helps lead to a better buffering of pH and lactic acid to help individuals tolerate harder exercise for longer. And also, this research group has recently found that chronic exposure to altitude can increase the sweating response of the forehead. Now, if these changes apply to the whole body, this could probably lead to better sweating response and a better regulation of core temperature. These altitude adaptations may be beneficial to performance in the heat, where aerobic fitness and maximal capacity is influenced by multiple physiological factors. But where altitude training could help is it might be able to increase oxygen transport throughout the body, which might improve maximal oxygen uptake throughout. It may also reduce cardiovascular strain, which might decrease the heart rate response during exercise. And if there is an increased sweating response, this might help with heat dissipation and might lead to better regulation of core temperature throughout. So in order to test whether or not a crossover effect of altitude training occurs, the researchers performed a logistically and technically demanding study. First, they had participants randomly perform 3 measures of aerobic fitness using a traditional maximal oxygen consumption test, or VO2 max test as it's also known as. And they tested the participants' performance in a thermal neutral environment at sea level, a thermal neutral environment at simulated altitude, and in a hot environment, which was 36 degrees Celsius, that was also at sea level. After performing these tests, they had participants perform their altitude training program. They had participants live at simulated altitude of 4,000 meters for 10 full days at the Olympic Sports Center Planica in Slovenia. Now, typically in lab-based research, we may have participants come in for a couple of hours each day, but they actually had participants live at altitude throughout the entire training program. On top of this, they also had each participant perform exercise each day for 60 minutes at 50% of their maximal cycling power at a simulated altitude. After they completed the 10-day program, they had the participants perform the same VO2 max tests in a randomized order. The results of the study can be found in this graph, where there is a percent change in aerobic fitness or VO2 max on the y-axis. What the researchers found that there was a crossover effect, where there was an 11% improvement in the thermal neutral sea level performance, and also an 8% increase in aerobic fitness in the hot and sea level condition. However, there was no difference in aerobic fitness pre to post in the thermal neutral simulated altitude condition, which is a common finding in this kind of research. When the researchers looked at some of the mechanisms for these changes, they did find that there was positive changes to the cardiovascular system, such as an increase in hemoglobin concentration and mass, which may have helped with O2 carrying capacity and led to these performance improvements. However, the researchers did not find an increased sweating response, heat loss response, or changes in core temperature, indicating that these changes were not likely due to thermoregulatory changes. Overall, this is a really interesting study, and the main take-home message is that there does appear to be a crossover effect with altitude exposure that is present at sea level in both a thermal neutral and hot environment. Thank you everyone for listening to this environmental brief. Hopefully you found it interesting and informative. My name is Phil Wallace, and I'm a Ph.D. candidate at Brock University in Canada. If you're interested in this environmental brief and want to get more information, try clicking this link and see some of our previous videos. If you also want to hear some world-class experts speak about their current research, click on this link to see some of the videos posted by the International Congress of Environmental Ergonomics.